journeying many fogs, but that one was outstanding, 1952, because fog and smut just used to stick to the window. It was like sticking there like paint. You just couldn't see through it. So you had to, if you was going to try and make a journey, you had to either lean out through the side window on your left, if you could get out that way, or look out through the door on this side.
When the buses came to Stamford Hill, they all stopped and they didn't move any further because of the fog. My father was stuck there. My young brother went down to look for him, walked down to the hill. We lived about another bus stop up the road here in Elmers Park. And he found my father on the bus and half carried him home.
My father was actually at work at Camberwell and he walked home that night. So, and it was the following morning that he couldn't breathe.
In Britain, weather always makes news. If it isn't a blizzard, it's fog. Perhaps it means a good summer to follow. Perhaps. Meanwhile, the beastly stuff gets right into you. Can't see. Can't breathe.
Oh, people were going sick all over the place. They were just falling down and just they just couldn't breathe.
And you could see my father was very ill. My brother was cradling him in his arms, you know, he couldn't get his breath. You could see it was really bad. The doctor said it when he came in the next day. He's weakening, his heart is weakening.
Of course, by then the fog was really, really thick and it was coming in all through the windows. This was a problem and into the room.
A Movietone cameraman drove through fog-shrouded London to report on the traffic chaos. The great smog invasion has caused a major dislocation of rail services. It's a menace, this choking, eye-watering smog.
During the night, I heard Mum banging on next door's wall and screaming out. And there was no ambulances, you see, you couldn't get ambulances out. The only way that they could get ambulances was if somebody walked in front of them with a flare.
One ambulance making its way across the city was carrying a young army doctor and his patient, a 21-year-old sailor who had collapsed in the fog.
I've never seen anything like it in a person of that age, a young man on active service in a state of complete collapse with breathing difficulties and obviously with a desperately failing heart. I tried the two local hospitals, but unfortunately they were overwhelmed with civilian cases, chest problems which had flared up because of fog, and they could hardly cope. So it had to be milled back. And when we got there with a great sense of elation, we'd made it against all the odds, and I rushed out the back to find that he had just died as we arrived. Just at that moment breathed his last. I tried to resuscitate him, but that was pointless. And the drivers were in tears, and I personally felt a great sense of defeat.
He died on a Tuesday evening, he was buried Wednesday morning. We were very, very upset with when he died, naturally. He was such a lovely man, you know.
Tolerant, understanding. He was just a lovely person.
He was.
My dad was 42 when he died. I can remember him quite well, really well, in fact. He had a very distinctive knock at the door, and I can remember that very well. And for a long time afterwards, I used to listen for the knock at the door. He was a lovely man, actually, really lovely man.
In the aftermath, questions began to be asked. Why had this particular fog taken so many lives? Why had London been so unprepared? The minister in charge of the government's response was Harold Macmillan.
Macmillan was very offhand in the Commons. If you read his replies, well, yeah, members can't blame my colleague for the weather, and this kind of remark. And there was no acceptance that this was a man-made disaster which needed remedial action.
I am I am not satisfied that further general legislation is necessary at present. We do what we can. But the honourable gentleman must realise the enormous numbers of broad economic considerations that have to be taken into account.
As he joined his family for Christmas in 1952, Harold Macmillan was still blaming the weather.
The culprit is the November sun. Having already shed its summer load, it fails to provide sufficient heat to dispel warm currents of air arriving from the Gulf Stream. Britain was back in the Dark Ages.
It was in the Dark Ages that London's air first began to turn bad.